um,
Recording
line
in progress.
15 is Dalid, and we were speaking about the three levels that there is to be found in uh, both Yitzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, and Matan Torah. That in all these things there are the three levels, meaning the way it occurred during Yitzias Mitzrayim. There's the way that both the way it occurred during Yitzias Mitzrayim, and there's the way it was in every single year that we're supposed to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim, we're supposed to remember Kriyas Yamsuf, and then there's the way how it is going to be, and also included in that is also how it's supposed to be every single day, and included in that as well is also the level of the daily the I'm sorry. Let's start again. My mind is a little bit. We have the way it occurred 3,300 plus years ago. Then we were supposed to remember it every Pesach and also every day. That falls into that category as well. Then we have the way it's supposed to, when it's going to be when Mashiach comes. We have that both in going out of Mitzrayim, that we learned in the Maimer 2 Mamarim ago, in B'chol Dor V'Dor. We learned that about Kriyas Yamsuf, that was the last Maimer before this one that we learned, the Maimer V'Hechrim, that we have that by Kriyas Yamsuf as well, since the Sefsa says that Kriyas Yamsuf needs to be also remembered daily, just like the going out of Mitzrayim must be remembered daily, and Chassidus explains that the remembering daily is a re-experiencing of it daily. So there is the three levels: Kriyas Yamsuf, the way it occurred 3,300 years ago; Kriyas Yamsuf, where we're supposed to remember it both on Pesach night and every single day; and Banor Yavr Barogil, the fact that we will cross the river with Mashiach when Mashiach comes. And the same thing, Matan Torah, there is also the way it occurred then. Then there's the occurrence of Matan Torah, recurrence of Matan Torah, that we're supposed to remember it on Shavuos, and every single time we sit and learn Torah, we're supposed to have the feeling and the appreciation that it's right now being given to us because Hashem is sitting across from us by the Torah. And then there's the way we're going to have the Torah of Mashiach, that on the one hand, we say that the Torah at present is Hevel L'Gabe Torah Mashiach, is considered just like air, just like breath, insignificant in comparison to the Torah of Mashiach's times, versus the that's on one hand, and on the other hand, we say that Matan Torah will never occur again, and Matan Torah included in it already whatever was taught in Mashiach's times. So now he's going to explain again the relationship between Yitzias Mitzrayim and Mashiach's times. That on the one hand we say that Mashiach's times it'll be above and beyond everything. On the other hand, Yitzias Mitzrayim will still have enough of a significance that we will mention it when Mashiach comes, as we already spoke in the previous two Mamorim, this concept. Again, 5th page of the Maimer, Ois Daled, line 15, page test. The idea behind this is the reason that also when Mashiach comes, they will mention, and we will still have to say about Yitzias Mitzrayim, that we will, which is specifically talking about where we have, it says about it in the Haggadah, that we will mention Parshas Vayomer and Krishma, which is because of the Yitzias Mitzrayim. Even though then when Mashiach comes, it will be considered wonders in comparison even to the days of your going out of the land of Mitzrayim. So it'll be, the going out of Mitzrayim will be insignificant. Should be Mitzrayim in this kafia, because when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim was the idea of subjugating or sublimating the Klippa. Like it's explained in time of Pirish, in explaining why does it say that the nation ran away. What need, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, was there for the nation to run away? Why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to say something that sounded misleading, that we're going a way of 3 days to go and slaughter and offer karbonos and serve our God. If he would have told Pari explicitly that we're leaving for good, Pari was scared for his own life. He would have done anything at the threat of Makas B'chayris because he thought he was going to die as well. So the reason why they had to run away was not because of Pari. The reason why they had to misdirect Pari was not because of Pari, but because of the Yidden themselves. Because the bad that's in the souls of Yidden was still in its full force, and since it was still in its full force, that's why they were worried. That Moshe Rabbeinu was worried that if the Yidden would hear that they're leaving Mitzrayim, they're leaving Klippa for good, that would have been something too much for them to handle. They would not be able to have taken that. They would not be able to accept that. They didn't want to leave Mitzrayim that way. Because it wasn't yet in the way of transformation. They didn't yet transform their nefesh bahamis, and therefore they would refuse to leave really. Varei ha'inyan shall the skafia tapel page yud ma'oirer montarois midas hartzochen. So one would think that since it was only a skafia, not a safka, so it's less. And in that way, yes, it was less. Yitzias Mitzrayim was in the way of a skafia. But when we go out in Mashiach's times, it says, Kiloi b'chipozim, it's saying we will not be running away, we will not be going with a rush, because it will be transformed, the klippa. There's nothing what to run away from. Yet, despite the fact that his hapcha is so much higher, yet iskafia awakens and demands by the person the attribute of victory. And the attribute of victory, the Rebbe said, like we have in the Maimer of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe said in the previous Mamorim, then the previous Rebbe explained in Basel Lagani the great quality of victory, because this great quality is associated with iskafia, which is the victory. They will also mention it in the future, and the Rebbe also said in the previous Mamorim that there's much more delight that the king takes in the victory over the enemy than when you don't have an enemy and you're just running the government and the kingdom the way he wanted to initially. So that's why this defeat of the enemy, that is both during Yitzias Mitzrayim in the literal sense, and the Yitzias Mitzrayim of every single generation, Yitzias Mitzrayim of every day, is the level of iskafia which is appreciated more than the level of ishapcha, and that's why we will mention it even when we get out of Mitzrayim. Not even when we get out of this golus with Mashiach. This is the reason that the idea of going out of Mitzrayim the way it was the first time around is what empowers the idea of going out of Mitzrayim in the avodah now, the Gam Legula Asida, also concerning the future redemption. Because then, in Yitzias Mitzrayim, that was when it was created and was opened up the pipeline and the channel for the whole idea of the redemption, like it's explained in Mamorim. So since even the redemption of the Gula Hasida, even the redemption of Mashiach, is something that comes as is something that's much more powerful than the redemption from Mitzrayim. But since it comes as a result of the Geula from Mitzrayim, because the Geula Mitzrayim opened up that pipeline, therefore it'll be mentioned then as well. So he says in line 8, this is also what the Chazal said, the Torah was not supposed to be begun, only from where it says that this month is for you, that says by going out of Mitzrayim. That's the idea of the birth of the moon, the Rebbe gives a very interesting explanation of the concept that we always bring down in many Amar Chassidus, the Maimer Chazal. Rashi says this: the Torah should have begun with Achai Shel Elohim. Why do we begin with Bereshis? And it gives a whole explanation and so on. At the beginning of Chumash Bereshis, Rashi brings this down. But what's the significance that the Torah should have begun with Achai Shel Elohim? The simple reason that's given is because the Torah is really the idea of Torah Lashon Hara. It's supposed to teach us mitzvahs. Since it's supposed to teach us mitzvahs, and the first mitzvah that Klal Yisrael was given was Achai Shel Elohim, so it should have started with Achai Shel Elohim. The Rebbe teaches a deeper level. Chodesh, the new moon, the mitzvah of sanctifying the moon, has to do with the idea of Geula, because the whole idea of the birth of the new moon is representative of the Levana, is representative of the Geula. Like the Chazal say, that they in the future will be renewed just like the moon. We say this in Kiddush Levana, meaning that the Yidden's Geula from this final exile is considered like the renewal of the moon. If so, he says in line 12, and this is understood, also the empowerment for the future redemption was also given in the going out of Mitzrayim, because that's when we said Achai Shel Elohim, and that was the whole idea of Geula. So the whole concept of Geula began with Achai Shel Elohim, with the Geula from Mitzrayim. And why was the Geula from Mitzrayim the beginning of all Geulas and the empowerment for all Geulas? Because Yitzias Mitzrayim had that advantage of Iskafia, of sublimating the Klippa, being victorious over Klippa, which is so special to Hashem, like we mentioned earlier. So that was Yitzias Mitzrayim. But we were talking about there's Yitzias Mitzrayim, there's the three things by Kriyas Yamsuf, and the three things by the giving of the Torah. So the Rebbe says further, line 15, Valderach the Kriyas Yamsuf, in a similar vein concerning the splitting of the sea. The advantage of the splitting of the sea over that with the river they're going to cross by foot, that's going to be when Mashiach comes, that they're going to split the river Euphrates into 7 Necholim, like we said in the Haftarah Nachshon Pesach. So again, the same idea is when we crossed the Yamsuf, that was a level of sublimating and subjugating the Klippa. In what way? Seemingly, we said, Kriyas Yamsuf, all the levels opened up, all the waters in the world split open, meaning that all the concealments that the water concealed opened up. She said, though it was the revelation of this is my God, and I will make him beautified. In other words, and they pointed with their physical finger, they were able to physically see it, like we said in the previous Maimer. And the maidservant on the splitting of the sea saw what even the greatest of prophets did not see. Mikol Makim. Here's a very interesting point. They didn't change because of it. Still in all, even after this revelation, the maidservant remained a maidservant. She didn't all of a sudden become a big Oived Hashem. So too, concerning all the levels that are higher than a shivcha, the higher than a maidservant. For example, the children that pointed to the Eibishter and said Zeh Keli Van Veyu, they didn't stop being children. They still played around with toys or whatever it was and ran around and played games. Afterwards, they didn't become all of a sudden big Oivdei Hashem and big intellectuals and so on. Ve'ilu, as opposed to what took place by Kriyas Yamsuf, that everybody saw, after the splitting of the sea, once they left the sea, so then the idea of prophecy was only very few specific individuals, The 70 elders had the nevuah, like it says Hashem took from the spirit of Moshe Rabbeinu and put it in the 70 zkenim. Nadav Avihu had nevuah, Moshe v'Aaron cholu. So certain people, v'loy l'chol b'nei Yisrael, not to all the Yidden. So even though it was such a great revelation, it didn't transform the person. Then by the splitting of the sea, they were only in a state of iskafia. So iskafia, as we said, is greater than ishapcha that's going to be when Mashiach comes. Because this advantage and quality of the splitting of the sea, this becomes also the opening and the beginning and the starting of the process of they will cross the river by foot. That's going to be when Mashiach comes. Like we said, what took place in Mitzrayim is the empowerment and the opening of the channel of what's going to take place when Mashiach comes. So now, on top of page Yud Aleph, he's going to say the same thing concerning Matan Torah. The advantage of Matan Torah then versus Mashiach's times, and therefore it began the process for Mashiach's times. Top of page Yud Aleph. There's the Yuvin Bambenegel Matan Torah in a similar vein will also be understood concerning the giving of the Torah. Dahine Afal Pisha B'Shas Matan Torah Hoyakol Yotzim Arberuch Soil Momailon Mata V'Cholu. Even though during the giving of the Torah, the voice came out from all the four directions, all the four sides of the world, and from above and below. In other words, they were surrounded by the sound of Hashem. Yisrael Sham Dalar Sinai Pascha Zuma, some and the Yidden that stood at Har Sinai, their whatever leftover remnants of dirt from, let's say, Chet Hadas or other things had left them. So therefore, it was to a certain degree transformative, not like by the splitting of the sea where the Shivcha remained the Shivcha and so on. Still in all, everything was only in a way of still, it was in a way of sublimation. Because this revelation was only temporary, but the world was not yet refined. The world did not change. Like an expression that Chassidus uses, by Matan Torah, the world was only nullified. But the world was not refined yet. The world remained itself a coarse place. Because the revelation came from above. And the nature of revelation from above is it doesn't permeate and transform that which is below. That's the whole purpose of our doing Torah mitzvahs. Our job is to not just be mevatel the world. That took place on Matan Torah, at least a one-time event. Our job is to transform and refine the world. It says, that was why it was possible to be unwanted things. In other words, the Cheta Egel after Matan Torah, because the Mata was not yet nizdachach, it was not yet refined. Just like the world was not yet refined during Matan Torah, so too concerning the Yidden, that said, we will do and we will understand, though they were not yet in the level of Nishma. In other words, first we will do and then we will understand. In other words, they if they were able to do it simultaneously, if they are holding by understanding, so they will understand. But no, we got to do first because we don't yet understand. Still, no, they said we will do. What is that? That's an expression of iskafia. That's the idea of iskafia. Still, as long though he's not yet holding at a level of understanding and comprehension, he nullifies himself. He sublimates himself. Mutzad Mile says because the advantage of the sublimation, that the person sublimated and subjugated himself by Matan Torah, that's why we were empowered that we should experience on a daily basis Matan Torah, like we said yesterday, Nois Na Torah Lashon Hoiva in the present tense. not just in the way of the world being nullified the way it was by Matan Torah, but where we are empowered to be learning Torah now in a way the world is being refined. To be involved with that, but which is below, to refine it. Through that constant daily Matan Torah, of refinement and iskafia that's leading to ishapcha, Matan Torah, we come to the idea of the giving of the Torah the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes. When the spirit of Tumah will remove from the earth. Then, when the spirit of Tumah will be removed, so then the clip will be transformed. Matan Torah not coiled to such a degree that in Matan Torah everything was given. Gamma Torah the loss of Lavi, also the Torah of Mashiach's times. Like we said before, Matan Torah the Matan Torah will not repeat itself. Last page in the Maimer Yud Beis. I say, gam close in the sphere of Omer. Yom Shmini Tzias Mitzrayim l'Chag Shavuos. That's also the general idea of the counting of the Omer. In the days between going out of Mitzrayim and the Yom Tov of Shavuos, we know that the Omer offering came from barley, which is known. Chassidus always emphasizes it's Michael Behema. Humans eat wheat, animals eat barley grain. By Sfiras we're working with the animal, the inner animal, the animal soul, in this portion of the world, meaning we are we're in a level of sublimating and subjugating the clipper. Only afterwards, when it comes to Yom Tov Shavuos, we have the special carbon of Shavuos, which is the two breads. The two breads were not brought from barley, they were brought from wheat, which is Michael Adam. Since it's human food, that indicates, now we're not an animal anymore, we've transformed, we're a human being that recognizes Hashem. And in a similar vein, that's also the reason why all the menachos in the Beis HaMikdash came made out of matzah. They couldn't rise. The carbon toida, which we brought every day except for during Pesach, that's why we don't say Mizmor Soida during Pesach and Erev Pesach, was chametz, or shtei lechem. And the shtei lechem was also, the two breads that were brought in Shavuos were also made out of chametz. What does the fact that it's made out of chametz indicate? Because after the avoid of Sfiras Omer, you didn't have to eradicate the chametz. It wasn't about bittul of the chametz, but it was the transformation of the chametz. You could have chametz and it would be holy chametz. Until through the general avodah these days in Torah study and the type of study that brings to action of the fulfillment of mitzvahs, the koil's managolus neder, in such a way that it says that by night her candle will not become extinguished, which means the night is referring to golus, is the candle does not get extinguished, meaning that this is the way how the name mitzvah of Torah is so powerful that it's not affected by the darkness of golus. So then, born by from the Talmud biyadi. So we come in such a way that he's coming to Gan Eden, and also he's coming to Mashiach's times with his learning in his hands, with his learning with him. Lil me Torah by Yom, that he studies Torah by day, bezman hageula, as we mentioned the previous in the first mimer of the Samshach, that daytime that's Mashiach's times, and the golus time is likened to a candle. Mashiach Yalamed is Kolam, when Mashiach will teach the entire nation, like it says in the pasuk in Shir Shirim Mishakenim Mishikis Piu, that Hashem will kiss us from the kisses of His mouth. Kapir Rashi, like Rashi explains, what are the kisses of Hashem's mouth? Soitameh Razi Torah, that He will teach us the secrets of the reasons of the Torah, the secrets of Torah. That's the level of Torah. It's beyond the level of refining the sparks, which is the Torah that we're studying now about the distinguishing what's permitted, what's prohibited, and so on. That's about engaging with the world because it's still in the level of Eskafia, but Mashiach's times it will be beyond the refinement, and therefore we will deal with the inner parts of the Torah, like it's brought down in the part of Tanya in the Geras HaKodesh, explaining what the section of the Zohar called the Raya Mehemna says, that when Mashiach comes, or in the Pnimius HaTorah, there's no questions and no disputes, because it's higher than refinement, as opposed to the Torah that we learn now is filled with questions, filled with disputes, because we're busy refining the sparks. It should happen immediately today.